We're here to talk about 40 years since the Kanishka bombing, which was the largest terror attack in North America before 9/11. So we'll go next to Puneet. So Puneet is a brilliant scholar. He's a great researcher, and he's unearthed a lot of facts that we didn't know. And Puneet, I think you came up with a new, a new piece of evidence that hadn't been seen previously, some hard evidence.
Which one?
Weren't there some air tickets that you unearthed?
Yeah.
Okay.
I found the, the air tickets that were used to plant the bomb. So, well, this is a, huge tragedy, and you can talk so much about it, and you can just pick so many facets of it, which will be shocking and, would engage you. But I think in all this tragedy, who did their job well? Because, it's blunders. Actually, FBI did an excellent job. So I think that is a very pertinent thing to point out. And second, this can be done anywhere, but I think it's pertinent that we discuss here, because Khalistanis are actually becoming a very, very grave threat to the United States as well. And I'm wearing a tricolor turban of India, and I'm, because it's more for Khalistanis than anybody else, because I feel they besmirched our turban and our tradition. So it's a pointer to that. But I'm a proud American citizen. When the Khalistanis in 1985, when they were planning to bomb the plane, around the same time, the Prime Minister of India, Rajiv Gandhi, was visiting the United States. And there was a parallel cell in New York of, Gurpratap Singh Birk, who were trying to assassinate the Prime Minister. But the FBI was so much on its toes. They got on camera how they were trying to, bomb the parliament and poison the water and kill thousands and do And that guy was sent to 17 years of prison. That immediately set a deterrent that you cannot get away with this stuff. Whereas in Canada, it was a free reign. So, it's so fascinating. For example, just to take one example, I think his name is Andrew McCarthy. And he is the prosecutor who prosecuted the 1993 World Trade Center bombing. And, when he looked at the Canadian case, he was like, I cannot believe that this is happening. So in this, the judge agrees, that, okay, the witness that you have brought to me is very credible. The evidence that she is presenting is very credible. She is giving a written testimony, and, it's very damning. But she's so terrified that she would not testify in front of the court. And he was like, that's why I throw it away. So in any sane judicial system, if you try to threaten the witnesses, as a defense, you should suffer. But in Canada, the prosecution suffers. So, they made a complete mockery of it. And, what's so shocking? So, for example, in 1985, this bombing happened, and the FBI is helping them. And these people were so belligerent and, so shameless and so unafraid that you would say, okay, if they bomb, they'll probably like to go silent. But what was found because of FBI wiretaps, months after, there was another plan. This was called I think the Montreal plan. So what they did was from Toronto to India, they bombed the plane. They were trying to do the same. From New York, they would put the bombs and they would do it. And there was, because of FBI, they got the wiretaps. So these people were discussing on camera, on wiretaps, that just months after, we have to do this. Now this case went to the court. The Canadian system was like, okay, you have to tell who was the informer because of this, that you got the wiretaps. Not that the wiretaps are wrong. And they were like, these people are, they will kill. These people are very dangerous. They have already committed mass murder. Then they were like, no, this is not accepted. In the end, what they were like a compromise, they brought the informer, but he was like, his face was covered. But again, that was thrown out. Then there was another Hamilton conspiracy. And it was the same thing, they found these people on wiretap, and it was the same people who bombed, these women and children. In this, they are discussing how, they would bomb the Indian parliament and how they would abduct and everything. It was caught on camera. But again, they had hidden the name of the informant from where they were getting this information. And the defense says, this is a violation that we don't have this information. So this case was again thrown out. So this is, they made a complete mockery of the Canadian justice system. And this is why it happened. So actually, from the FBI's perspective, like if we want to deal with terrorism and how to deal, so I think this served as a very good example. And they did everything that was in their hands, to help, but it fell off. There is another, very interesting snippet of this. So they killed the main witness. And again, the main witness, he had given a sworn testimony. He had a, attempt on his life. He was crippled, and then and everything was right, but his evidence was not allowed to be, put in the court. Even though that evidence was being verified from 3 different sides, which had no interaction with the other. So one was another FBI informant who said, okay, the bomber had told me, and and he was like, if I go to Canada, I'll be killed. So I don't trust the Canadian law enforcement or the police. So they had to pay him money. You get your own security. But when he got his own security and came to Canada, they were like, we cannot accept your testimony because you have been paid. Now this is so outrageous because he had given the same testimony when he was in America, when he had no risk to his life. So he was giving the same testimony that he had given in America. But when he came to Canada, they're like, you have been paid, so you're a paid witness. So I would just really recommend some of the things that are so outrageous. Like most of the people I see, they have very puzzled looks on their face. This is nothing. I can go on and on and on. But there is a great book by Terry Mulesky, and in Indian we have an expression, Gagar mein sagar, which is basically you put like an ocean into an earthen pot. So he worked for 40 years for he was the face of the Canadian television. So in that you have very limited time, and you really have to be succinct. So in just a small 200-page book that you can read in 3-4 hours, is really put the case well, and you get to know everything. So it's an outrage, and from these people who at least in America they kept their head down, now they have become so emboldened. So I actually put it on my Twitter as well. So the same guy, and there is no doubt that he did it. There have been 2-year-long, multi-year-long investigations by Canada. And based on very, very hard evidence, they found, for example, they built the bomb, they went to the forest and they did test explosion, they built the ticket, so everything. So the mastermind, his name is Talvinder Singh Parmar. So if you go to Stockton Gurdwara, I put it on my Twitter. So they're venerating him. They are actually equating him to the preceptors of the Sikh faith. So for them, they are like Jesus Christ. So they're like, okay, today we are celebrating the birthday of ex-Sikh Guru, and we are also celebrating the martyrdom day of, this Talvinder Parmar. So what kind of monsters would rise out of this? It's a very worrisome thing. And also, I have one more point that I would like to underline. This is a giant, immigration fraud. So you basically say Khalistan, and then you get an asylum claim here. And what this terrorist is, when they talk in English, they talk about democracy and human rights. So they speak to their gullible Western audience. But when they speak in their native tongue, they have to have their core supporters. So there they really speak the truth. So I found a video and I subtitled it, and it became a huge issue. So one of the big Khalistanis, and that time actually he was sitting in the Indian Parliament. He said, yes, I give a letter for money. You take a letter from me that you're a Khalistani and you are being oppressed, and you'll get an asylum in the West. And they were said, okay, is there a price? He's like, yeah, there is a fixed price. And then it became such a big news. So some people would not believe. So, a UK publication, they wanted to corroborate it. So they had an undercover reporter, and who would go to this lawyers. He's like, okay, we have Sikh, he's not a Khalistani, but he wants an asylum. He's like, I don't care. You say you are a Khalistani, and we will make all these claims that you were sexually tortured, and now you are suicidal and all these things. So after that, when my report was corroborated in UK, then their prime minister passed a law that India is on the safe list. So you cannot claim political or religious asylum, you have been persecuted. But it is still going on in the US. And I think, you should stamp out. Now I, hear something is being done. But all these people who have basically gotten a letter from this, fraud in India to get an asylum, I think all their claims should be relooked at. So, yeah, it's like, I think that was a summary of what I had to say. If you have questions or anything.
What is being done to give all the facts to Sikh youth? Politicians in America who are being influenced by Khalistani leaders in the West?
Actually, nothing is being done. And like terrorism, like you have to understand how the mindset works. So it's like basically like jihadis. It's all about, wound collectors, like this happened. Like if you see, maybe a little bit on a tangent, like America is the big Satan and, it has done like Muslims a lot of grief. If you actually look, America has supported like this Yugoslav war. America sided with the Muslims. They started bombing Serbia. But their mind doesn't work. It's basically, and also, there is a sociological reasons. So people may not understand, like, for example, not a single guru came from the Jat community. This is a fact. Their contribution in the Sikh scripture, like Gurbani, is next to zero. But almost all the Khalistani terrorists, they came from the Jat community. And now if the vice president of this country, like I was just reading his book, J.D. Vance, he writes, hillbilly elegy. So if he writes his tradition, if you understand, you will understand like the pathologies in the Jat community as well, because it happens because of certain reasons. So they have a tradition of blood feud that you just have to kill and, like this is, so they are just like, they lost, the terrorism lost in India, they came here, and now they have basically brainwashed their kids that you have to take revenge. And to speak against Khalistan was so dangerous 40 years ago. So like, it happened in Canada, on the west coast was this guy, Ujjal Dosanjh, also a Jat, but he understood what was the problem was, and he kept shouting at the Canadians, this is the problem you're doing. He was killed to an inch of his death, and again, the murderer got away because of, like a procedural error. Then on the east coast, there was a Balraj Jol, also a Jat. He tried to explain like what the problem was. But he was beaten to an inch of his, they smashed his skull, they broke both his arm, they broke his leg, they smashed his hand. And the problem was at that time, they were like, doing low-level jobs. Now they have created a generation who are so brainwashed, and like Muslim Brotherhood, they have infiltrated all organs of the Canadian state. To give you an example, this happened in Canada. This is like the biggest tragedy that happened in Canada. There is nothing in their parliament. But when there was a guy called Hardeep Nijjar, surprising or not unsurprising, also a Jat, he used to stand on his pulpit, and I have put his videos that he'd say like, we did suicide bombings, this is our proud legacy. And he entered Canada by a fake marriage, and he was on a terror watch list. When he got killed, the Canadian Parliament did like a minute of silence. So even you look at, so like you have this Home Department in America. There in Canada in 2018 they brought a report of what are the terror threats, and in that they mentioned Canadian threat is such a big problem, and they created such a pressure that there was again, by the way, like a Jat Sikh, his name was Ramesh Sangha. So he understood what the problem was, and he came from a Punjabi constituency, so they understood. So it's not all Sikhs support Khalistan. He came to the parliament by being voted in and by speaking against terrorism. So he said, why are you conflating the Sikhs and Khalistanis? This report is against Khalistan and they are a grave threat. You know what happened to him? He was kicked out. The liberal whites, they told him, you're a racist. Imagine the outrageousness of this. So there is a Sikh guy, he's saying, yes, that there is a Khalistani terror cult on there. And he's saying, because you are speaking against this, even though you are from the same community, even though you are brown, you are a racist. And he was kicked out and his parliamentary career was over, and now he runs a law practice. And I can give you many such examples. So it was very dangerous to speak against them 40 years ago, and these people have become much more influential now. And you have to understand how the terror cult works. It's never, because you understand how you work in a democracy. Democracy is give and take. Okay, what are your issues? We do it. But they don't have this thing. They have a tradition of a blood revenge. And it is basically collecting the wounds. So, we take revenge. So people don't have an understanding of what real terrorism is. And that is actually the whole problem.
So I'm just going to take a minute to read something that was written by Canada's High Commissioner to India. The constant stream of protests from the Indian government over objectionable Sikh activities in Canada generated an ongoing and uncomfortable level of stress, not only for myself, but on a trickle-down basis to other members of the mission. Nasty incidents took place across Canada with incursions into Indian consular missions, threats to diplomats, desecration of the Indian flag, and the like. For example, in June, at virtually the same time that I was providing, on instruction from Ottawa, assurances to the Foreign Secretary, Indian Foreign Secretary, with regard to the upgraded security being provided at Indian missions in Canada, an armed gunman walked into the Consulate General in Toronto, fired some shots, and then slipped away unimpeded. Through the late spring and summer of that year, I was summoned to the Foreign Ministry to receive strong protests on some 18 occasions. The situation was so serious that there were even suggestions that India might see itself compelled to withdraw its High Commissioner from Canada in order to emphasize its displeasure and concern. I personally was very understanding of India's anger. Indeed, this anger differed little from my own at what I perceived as the cavalier treatment these protests were receiving at home. My request for a firm explanation as to concrete actions being taken largely remained unanswered. My point to the Canadian authorities was simply enforce the law. That is all that was being asked. You might think that this was written recently, but this was, the time period is 1984. So you can see that from that time to now, nothing has changed.
So,
and if either of you would like to address the 2018 report on the threat of terrorism and how a reference was being taken out.
no, it's basically in the end that person was kicked out and the reference was taken out, even though like what it said was based on hard evidence. So you understand you have a pressure group, which can basically an upturn. It's not a political statement. It's by a statement by their home department, which evaluates terrorist threat. So, the security of the Canadian systems is a joke and has to bow down to this terrorists who have infiltrated. Even this guy, Niger, it's so fascinating. So he's on a terror watch list. He infiltrates into Canada. They know it. They said he was tortured. The system says, this is false. Then he gets married. Then they find out, but he still gets residency and citizenship in record time. The only thing that means is basically, the Khalistanis have even infiltrated the citizenship department, like what we have USCIS here. So, that is, you just read the trial testimony, it's so fascinating, because they're everybody, even, there were so many Khalistanis, who were really mad at India about what happened in '84. But then they saw this, ruthlessness and bloodletting, and, they turned against them. So, for example, I think his name is Sukhminder Grewal. I'm talking from the memory, when they killed the journalist. And he said, can you testify like this guy? He's like, you don't understand what is happening to me. They go, to my family in India, and nobody is there to control them. And they're like, okay, you live there, and you have your one, sister of your wife. She goes here, we will take care of her. So he was terrified, he was not some Gandhian, he was a gangster himself. And he was like, we can't do anything. So now we have a question that actually dovetails, directly into it. So it's asked, can you speak about the threats issued to journalists and others that question the Khalistani narrative, right? So actually we are talking about Terry Milewski, and as much as we can thank him, it's not enough. Let's take the case of Terry Milewski, that guy, he's like a thorough gentleman, you just have to listen to him. He had to live under police protection. Same, there were only 2 journalists, it was the biggest event that happened in Canadian history. But only 2 journalists that spoke out, and they made their life hell, and both had to get police protection, Kim Bolan and Terry Milewski. Now, Terry Milewski is a very interesting character because, Canada is a small country, and there they have CBC. They don't have many channels, right? And Terry Milewski was the face of CBC. He was not just a journalist. He was the journalist. He was the face of their Canadian television for 40 years. Now when this happens, you know what, the Khalistanis have so much influence. So for example, you know, whenever there is a Khalistan terror incident or, you know, a diplomatic fracas in India, they book him, and the last time, you know, they cancel him, sorry, we can't have you. Because, you know, we get so much pressure because of the Khalistanis from inside. They get Khalistanis to speak about it. And not just any Khalistanis, Khalistanis who are part of the WSO. So, you know, in the WSO inauguration that happened in New York City, you know, Sanjay mentioned that, you know, we will not rest till we kill 50,000 Hindus. They are on record saying this. So they will have a WSO representative on the Canadian television. But the guy who worked for that very same network for 40 years, and he is like the most recognized face in Canada, you know, he's not allowed. So that is how much they have pressure inside the CBC. And, you know, like, again, I would go, like, go into the book, how they, you know, they killed the journalist. They killed the journalist. First, they crippled him, and then they killed him. And there was, like, another journalist in UK who was basically corroborating that, you know, these people had confessed, you know, like, boasted about doing the plane bombing. He was also killed. So you don't have to kill, you know, like, hundreds. You have to kill a few. And, you know, everybody knows, okay, like, even these most protected people cannot be protected. Then, you know, and also, like, for example, this journalist who was, like, you know, witness to the confession of this plane bombing. First, they had, like, bombs at his home. Thankfully, he was, and the day he was, you know, finally killed after being crippled, supposedly cameras should be working, but the cameras were not working on that precise day. So, you know, these people have just infiltrated. So, you know, America is such a grand country, but you see, it lost the war in Afghanistan and you know, because Pakistan had basically offered a safe haven to the terrorists, where they organized and where they did all the campaigns. And Canada is basically a Pakistan of the West, where they take, you know, they have a safe haven and they can plan mass murder. And this basically terrorists control this country.
And question to you, Puneet. You talked about how the US was gained by this one of the leaders in India providing fake letters for asylum, and President Trump has zero tolerance policy towards terrorism. He's been saying it for all along, saying that, you know, we're importing all these gang members and terrorism. Would you or somebody reach out to the administration asking them to look at this, probably FBI Director Kash Patel?
I would love to, and I'm trying to do this on Twitter, and actually it makes a difference. So after just one Khalistani was arrested, and he was also of Babbar Khalsa, the same group that basically bombed the plane, and, you know, they, I think, extradited him or they put him in jail. It was so fascinating for this, you know, SFJ turn overnight. You know, they used to put posters of, like, the Indian, like, chief minister, which is like equivalent to a governor, what you have in America, and they would, you know, like, bullet hole him, you know. And now suddenly, after one person was elected, they suddenly became Gandhian. They're like, you know, why do you indulge in violence? Why are you bringing bad name to us? So these people are also cowards, and certainly deterrent works. You know, I talked about the Gurpratap Singh Birk case. It was exactly at the same time. Same time they were planning to bomb the plane. Same time they were planning to kill Rajiv Gandhi here. But they show, okay, like, before it happened, you know, you should actually look up on this. His name is Gurpratap Singh Birk. So Birk is pronounced as B-I-R-K. It's a very, you will find, you know, it was written, and they were, and the FBI was so strong on that, and they immediately got the message. Okay, you don't mess up around here. You try to do it, you're gonna go in, and you're going for long. And that's what happened, and that's why you did not, you know, have the cases here. And the other, you know, what we were talking, people don't speak about them. I said, just mentioned earlier, but I just want to underline, you understand the psyche of these people. They are so bloodthirsty that, you know, they have bombed a plane, right? They actually wanted to bomb 2 planes. You know, one of them didn't happen. And most of them were actually women and kids. So on this flight, 84 were kids under the age of 12, you know, because all of them were going for, you know, vacation. So they are not like thinking, what the hell did we do? You know, maybe we sinned. This is what you would think. They are on American wiretaps. So Hamilton conspiracy and Montreal conspiracy. You just Google them, you'll find like PTI reports of that time. And they're not just like boasting, like in a very clinical way. So for example, they're planning to bomb the Indian parliament and, you know, destroy the subways. And we will find like a Sikh and, you know, abduct his kid and kill, you know, and with him try to enter the parliament. And if he doesn't agree, then, you know, we will decapitate his child. This is what they're thinking. So we have to bomb the Indian parliament, and this is months after they have bombed the plane. And we have to bomb another airline from, from New York to India. So they are so bloodthirsty and, crazy. So, there is never a, point about argument. But the thing is, between a lawyer and a thug, the thug wins on the street. So that's why everybody is silent. Sanjay also pointed out, if you look at the Sikhs, so more than 90% are very proud to be Indians. So there is no question of them. But slowly and slowly, they are capturing more and more, spaces. They are capturing the gurdwaras, and where they basically brainwash the kids. You just have to take a revenge. They show like pictures of Sikh suffering. It's exactly what they do in Pakistan. This is happening in Kashmir. You have to go and fight a jihad, and you have to take revenge. Exactly the same. And you have to understand how terrorism works and what are the mindset of the terrorist, and what are the costs you have to set to basically defeat it. And you have to have democracies don't have that in their stomach to actually fight them. To take one example, I'm sorry I'm taking too much time. So in Canada, there is a Ministry of Multiculturalism, right? And they basically fund all these gurdwaras. And India has been complaining about this for 40 years, since when Mrs. Gandhi was alive. So you see how they basically work. They capture a gurdwara. Now they are getting hundreds of thousands of dollars from the Canadian government to do this. This is going into terrorism and their thuggery. Now and they organize this, like rallies or protests. So they invite both Democrats and the Republican side, conservative and liberals. Now for them, they don't understand. Like in India, for example, if Ethiopians is fighting with somebody from Sierra Leone, you don't understand what is happening. So they don't understand. For them, it's all the same brown people, right? And they see, okay, these people can gather a large number of people. Let's not speak against them because we need the votes. They don't understand. They are just about winning the election. But you have to make the case that these people are a very grave threat for their own citizens. And what we are dealing with is national security and terrorism. It's not like, your turn goes. Otherwise, civilization collapses. I make a point. If you go to my Twitter handle and if you search for training camps, so it was not just said. So you'll find videos. I've actually posted videos from late 90s. And at that time, Afghan jihad was going on. So, these things were not bad in Western capitals. So they used to boast. And they even used to say, call us Mujahideen, we are not terrorists. So I posted videos of terror camps being run on Afghanistan-Pakistan border, which were being attended by these Khalistanis. And a lot of Khalistanis, because they are being interviewed where you have come from. So they're actually from UK and Canada. So these terrorists from UK and Canada were taking terrorist training in Afghanistan-Pakistan border. And then they came to India and did like acts of mass murder. So we have clear evidence of that.
Okay, I think we're just going to take one final question before we wrap up.
One of my friends, she's Hindu, and her son, he's a doctor, and he was going to marry, and he has a Sikh girl, right? And that's very common these days, right?
Yes.
But the unusual thing that they did is, and I don't know if it is usual now, this was about 15 years ago, they gave the son-in-law to be, the bride's parents, gave him a book that showed that Khalistanis didn't, terrorize and bring the plane down, but it was government of India. So how can you counter that? Because this is mainstream now.
Yes.
This is mainstream.
Puneet?
Yeah, so actually it's very interesting. So in like 9/11 happened, and we had the 9/11 Commission. So in Canada this happened, and they had like a retired Justice of the Supreme Court, John Major, and his commission. So what is very interesting is, and that commission has basically said the Babbar Khalsa and Khalistani terrorists of Talwinder Parmar have done it, right? And what is so interesting, it's in a way shameful also. We find so much of this evidence not because of 329 that were killed. Actually, there was another bomb that was supposed to go off from Japan, but that fell on the ground, and the Japanese investigation was so strong that they found, okay, from where they had got this transistor bomb. That was from Inderjeet Rayat, who was convicted, because he had basically purchased from where they found the tape that was used to roll around from his home. So the evidence against him is completely, and you see how Khalistanis, I was talking about WSO. When this commission was going on, they again tried to push that the Indian government has done it. And, and these people are so shameful, and, they get away with something. So imagine like Al-Qaeda is saying, no, it was an inside job. What they even dared to do was falsify the lie in name of an investigator. So there was an investigator by the name of Gary Bass. And, he said he is not. So then, basically, Gary Bass had said nothing of that sort. John Major looked at that, then this is nonsense. And they actually have written that these people have, are wasting our time and trying to mislead us. These people are speaking. But again, there are no cost. The John Major reports that these people are trying to mislead and, presenting all side of nonsense. They are lying in the name of the investigation. But okay, good, he gentlemanly made a comment, but there are no cost to do these things. Just imagine, there is a 9/11 that has happened, and there is a 9/11 commission that is happening, and these guys, Al-Qaeda or Muslim Brotherhood, tries to, mislead the investigation, but there are no cost to it. Again, the report is out. Read the John Major report. It's completely, Talvinder Parmar was the mastermind and the instigator of this atrocity. It was done by Babbar Khalsa Khalistani Sikh terrorists.